Today's daf, Be'ezus Hashem, is Masechta Shavuos Daf Lamed Hey. Before we begin, I'm just going to review just one pasuk in Masechta Shavuos in the parsha of carbon oil of Yared, which this is basically the subject of this parak, which we're soon ending anyway. Uh, but here in the parsha of oil of Yared, we are familiar with the other averos that you have to bring a carbon oil of Yared, like Shavuos Bitui, any shvua that you swear that you're going to eat or not eat, or if you touched something that's tameh, and then you went into the base of Migdash, or you ate kachim, etc. And if you did that avera by mistake and you realized your mistake, then you bring a carbon oil of yared, which is different than a carbon chatas, again, because it depends on your uh, financial situation to determine what you're going to bring as your atonement. Now, here the pasuk begins that parsha, and let's just read this one pasuk because it's so important. The nefesh ki secheta. If one person makes this avera, what is that avera is? Vishama koil Allah. He heard that somebody else is trying to bring a curse, a sound of a curse on him. Vuhu aid, and he's part of a group of witnesses. In other words, this guy, let's give the example. Reuven lent Shimon money. Shimon denies that he ever received the money from Reuven. So Reuven goes to Levi and says, I make you swear that you should be cursed if you don't come and say edus on my behalf, testimony on my behalf, that Shimon owes me money. Okay? And this guy swears that I don't know any edus, or he just says that whatever you're saying, the curse should happen. I don't know any testimony on your behalf, but really he does know. Oy raw, even if he doesn't know exactly what the situation was. He just saw the situation. In other words, if Levi saw that Reuven gave Shimon money, he doesn't know if it was a loan or Reuven is repaying Shimon back for a loan. So you could just witness an event, or yada, or you know that the event happened. That's this part of the pasuk. You know the event happened. That means that Shimon told Levi, "Hey, I borrowed money from Reuven." Levi didn't exactly see that Reuven give money to Shimon, but Levi, nevertheless, is somewhat of an aid. So the pasuk says, "Im lo yagid." If he, and now notice the spelling of this word loy, which we'll discuss, lo yagid. He's not going to say his testimony. I guess maybe he's too scared to testify that Shimon owes money. Maybe Shimon's part of the mafia, and so he decides to say, I don't know anything. Im lo yagid, if he doesn't say his testimony, and he takes on this curse of a shvua, the nasa avoyne, he gets a big avera, even on purpose. So when he wants to do tshuva, even if he knows for a fact that he's not, he purposely made this shvua, that he's not coming to say testimony, and now he regrets it. So then he's also part of this group that brings this carbon oil of yared, like the oil of yared, which depends on your financial situation. So this is the end of Parshas Vayikra. So it's a hard pasuk to translate. But nevertheless, we begin with the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Hey Amar Aleph, and now everything will become very easy from the Mishnah. So Mashbiani Alei Alechem. A guy says to somebody else, Reuven says to Levi, okay? So again, Reuven lent money to Shimon. Shimon denies it. So Reuven goes to Levi. But now it's not the question that Reuven lent money to Shimon. What he's saying is, he says to Levi, Mashbiyani ani alechem, I make you swear that im loitevayu v'se'udinui, you don't come say edus on my behalf, you don't say testimony on my behalf. Shama ish ploni, this guy Shimon said litili masayim zuz, that he's going to give me 200 zuz. In other words, Reuven never lent Shimon money, but Reuven is saying that you, Levi, no testimony that Shimon said that he's going to give me 200 zuz. V'loy nasam, and he didn't give me. So now to say testimony in court that now Shimon promised to give me 200 zuz. Harei elu peturim, if Levi swears that he doesn't know testimony, and then he regrets it, he doesn't have to bring a carbon oil of yair on this thing because it's not a shvuas ha'edus, in other words. Why? If he did it on purpose. Why? Because the only time that she'ein chayovin ella al tviyas mamim kibim kadim. It's only if Ruvain was claiming that Shimon owes him money, like he deposited money by him or he lent the money. But if Shimon just said, "I'm going to give Ruvain money," Shimon could always retract it. So it's not something held up in court. So the fact that Levi says, "I'm not coming to say testimony to defend Ruvain," is not really a loss for Ruvain, because Shimon could say, turn around and says, "Okay, I said I was going to give, but I'm not giving." You never, so therefore, if Levi doesn't come to say Edis, so he's not in violation, he's not in this parsha of Shavuos Ha'edis. Another case number 2. Mashbiani aleichem kishetedi li'edish advayusedune. A guy says to Ruvain, says to Levi, "I make you swear that when you're going to know some testimony for my behalf, you're going to come and say testimony." Harei eli paturim. That's not shvuas edis. They should call me shvuah leedis. The shvuah, the act of swearing came before the event. The event has to come first. That Ruvain lent Shimon money, and Levi knows about it. And then Ruvain says to Levi, "You better come to court to testify on my behalf." So the event occurred, and then the shvuah happens, not the other way around. Also, in the third case is Amad Bebeis HaKnesses. A guy gets up in shul, and he says he knows that he has witnesses in the shul that saw him. Like Reuven gets up in shul and says, "I know there's witnesses in the shul that saw me lend money to Levi," but he didn't designate who. And he says, he says, "I make you swear that if any one of you know Edis, you should come to say testimony. Harei Eli Paturim, then they're all exempt from Shavuos Edis, because he didn't designate, hey, I'm making you swear because I know you know Edis. For a fact, that's the way you approach. You have to approach somebody and say, "I know you know testimony on my behalf. I want you to come to court and testify on my behalf," and then make you swear that if you don't come testify on my behalf, then a big curse should happen to you. That's called Shavuos Edus. What happens? Amal Shnaim, you tell two people, "Mashbiani aleichem ish ploini ploini shim atem yodim li edus shetavoyu usuduni." I make you swear, you that if you do know Edus, you should come to say testimony. So far, so good. Reuven goes to Levi and Yehuda and says, "Listen, I make you swear that if you know testimony on my behalf, you should come to say testimony. And I know you saw that I lent money to Shimon." And they say, "We swear we don't know testimony." But it turns out, they know the testimony. Levi Yehuda know, but they're aid mipi. They didn't actually see it. They heard from another witness. So they're not really a kosher witness in court. Let's say there's like a whole bunch of Eidim, and you make them all take the oath of Eidus, and amongst the witnesses, one of them is a relative or somebody who is disqualified from testifying. So anyway, this group cannot come testify. So the fact that they said, "Oh, we swear we don't know we don't know any testimony on your behalf," doesn't mean anything, because even if they did, they wouldn't be able to come to court because they are disqualified from Edis. Harei Eli Paturim, they're potter from the carbon of Shavuos Edis. Let's say the claimant, Reuven, instead of going over to the witnesses himself, he sends his messenger. Sholach biyad avda, he sent his servant to make the shvuah. Or the defendant said, that if you know Edis, you should come to say testimony. So Harei Paturim, they're exempt. That's not Shavuos Edis. The way it works is that the claimant has to go over to a pair of witnesses and say, "I know you know testimony. I make you swear that you're going to come say testimony." If they swear we don't know testimony for you, that's called Shavuos Ha'edus. And if they violate that, they have to bring this carbon oil of the Yared. So the Gemara is just going to bring the sources of everything we discussed in the Mishnah. Some of them you can see in the pasuk. Tan Rabbanim, Mashbiani Aleichem Loi Toivoni Useiduni Shama Ish Ploini Litinli Misayim Zuz V'Loi Nasam. I make you swear to come to say testimony that so and so said that he's going to give me 200 zuz and never gave it to me. Yochel Yahi Chayav. I would think those witnesses will be liable if they swear a Shavuos Eidus that they don't know Eidus. Talmud Loima Sechta L'Gzeir Shava. It says by Shavuos Eidus, the Nefesh Ki Sechta, as you can see on the screen, Ki Sechta. And it also says by Shavuos HaPikhadoin, where a guy deposits something by somebody, and now he comes to pick up his deposit, and the guy says, I don't have it. L'Gzeir Shava. Nemekan Sechta v'Nemelahalam Sechta by Shavuos HaPikhadoin also says the word Sechta, Malahalam B'Tvius Mom V'Yeshloi. Just like over there, by Shavuos HaPikhadoin, you're claiming money, and you have it. Avkam Tvius Mom V'Yeshloi. That Reuven is claiming money, and the other person has it. But here, Reuven is not claiming that Shimon owes him money. Reuven is claiming that Shimon said he was going to give him money. So that Shimon doesn't really have to follow through on that. So if they swear, oh, we don't know testimony for you, that's not Shavuos Ha'edus. Mashbi'ani aleichem kishetedili edus. The guy says, I make you swear, if you're going to ever know any testimony on my behalf, you should come to say testimony. That's not Shavuos Ha'edus. Tana Rabbanim, Mashbi'ani aleichem. When you will know Edus, with testimony, you should come to say testimony on my behalf. I would think they are liable. Talmud Loima, the pasuk says, "V'shama kol olav hu eid ayra ayada." Misha kadma edus l'shvua, v'leisha kadma shvua le'edus. The oath, the event has to precede the oath, but not the oath precedes the event. In other words, the event of the loan happened. Reuven loaned money to Shimon. So now Reuven goes to Levi and Yehuda and says, come to say testimony on my behalf. That's the way it works. Not that he made them swear first, and then he loaned money to Shimon. Even if in the shul is the two witnesses, and he made the whole shul take this oath, that's not Shavuos Eidus. So the Gemara says, Pshita, you didn't designate you witnesses, the actual witnesses. You just said a group shvua. And amongst the whole people in the shul, not everybody saw the loan. So certainly that's not Shavuos Eidus. Like tzricha, I don't need it. The koyelai, the witnesses are in the front row. So the guy is, up on the dais, and he points to, and he's looking at the two people in the front row, but he's referencing the whole shul. The same I would have thought, command the Amalu Dam. It's as if he's directing his speech towards those two people in the front row, his witnesses. Kamash Milan, it's not so. We learned like this. A man sees a group of people, is standing around, amongst that group of people is his witnesses. And he says to the entire group, I expect you swear that if you know testimony, you should come to say testimony. And I would think they're liable. Talmud Loima v'hu eid. He didn't designate you witnesses. He made a group a statement. Every person here, and he specifically designated this people that no testimony. In this case, when he says kol ha'oindim kan, it means you who are standing here, and he's looking at probably these guys in front of him, so he's designating these witnesses, so that's a good shvuas ha'edus. Amal Shnai Mashbiya Ani Alechem. Tana Rabbanan. Rabbis taught. Amal Shnai, he said to two people, Mashbiya Ani Alechem, Ploinim Ploinim, Im Atem Yoyben Li Eidus, Shetavayu Sadinu, Behain Yoyden Lim Eidus, Eid Mepi Eid, Oishe'echem Mem Karav Apostle, Yochel Yehecha Yavim, Talmud Loima, Im Lo Yagav and Osavoine, Beru'uyin, Lahagoda, Akosa Medaber. In other words, you can't go over to a known thief and say, oh, make an oath of testimony that you know Eidus on my behalf, because that even if he would ever come to court, they won't accept him as a witness anyway. So he can't be liable taking the Shavuos Eidos. So therefore, that's what im lo yagid. Here we're talking about somebody who could be appropriate to tell over their testimony, the one who is appropriate to testify in court. Those people are in the parsha of Shavuos Eidos. Sholach biad avdoi, Talmud Rabbanan, rabbis taught. Sholach biad avdoi, shomer lehem anitba, bashbian leichem shematim yodim li eidish shvoyis duhi, yochol yehei chayavim, Talmud loimem lo yagev enosav avoidoi. My Talmuda. In other words, the claimant has to really go over to the witnesses. He can't send the messenger to the witnesses and make them take a Shavuos Eidos. He has to do it himself. So the Gemara says, where do you see it in the pasuk? Omar Rabbi Lazar in loy yagid. You see, the lamed vav is also spelled like loy to him. If you ignore the aleph, in loy lo yagid. If they're not talking to the claimant directly, if they're talking to the claimant directly, and they testify that's making a Shavuos Eidos, then v'nos avoyni they get their vera. But if they decide to take a Shavuos Eidos to not the claimant himself, but a messenger of the claimant, so then they're potter. There is no Shavuos Eidos. Back next Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Mashbiya aleichem, matzava ani aleichem, isar samani. A guy says, I make you swear. Or he says, I'm commanding you to come to say Eidos. Or aserchem ani, or I'm putting an isser on you, right? A prohibition on you that you should come to say testimony. And they say, yes, we don't know any testimony. So then, harei alichayavim, this is their liable for Shavuos Eidos. Now, very important. When the proper way to make a Shavuos Eidos is when the claimant goes over to the witnesses and says, I make you swear in the name of God that you know testimony on my behalf, and if you don't deny to come, a big curse should happen to you. So you actually have to use God's name in the Shavuah. So let's say instead of using God's name, a guy uses Bashamayim of Aretz. He says, I make you swear in the heavens and the earth. So then you didn't use God's name in the Shavuah. So Areli Peturim, then that's not a Shavuos Eidos. Let's say you use God's name, but instead of Yud Kei Vav Kei, you use the Aleph Dalet Nun Yud, or Yud Kei or Yud Kei, you use just Yud Kei, or use the word Shaddai, or B'tzvakois, B'chanun, B'rachum, B'erach Apayim, B'rav Chesed, V'chol Kunuyin, and all the nicknames of God. You know, there's 13 attributes that are characters, traits of God that we call him by those names. So that's enough. So if you, for example, say, I make you swear in the Erech Apayim or in the Chanun V'rachum that you should come to say testimony on my behalf, so that is a very good Shavuos Eidos. Hamakalel b'kulam. You're not allowed to curse somebody with the name of God. Okay, so if you makalel, instead of using the name of God, use the nicknames of God. Chayev, you are liable. Divrei Meah. The Chachamim Paitrim. Chachamim said you're not liable. Hamakalel over v'ima b'kulam. If you curse your father and mother using the nickname of God, you go over to your father or mother and say, Erech Apayim should smite you. So then, Chayev. Divrei Meah. Chachamim Paitrim. Chachamim says you're potter unless you use the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Hamakala atzbay. The Torah, if you curse yourself, now there's an isser to curse yourself, because the Torah says hishama nafshecha. You have to watch your own, personal, and the chavera. You're not allowed to curse your friend, like sakala cheresh. So if you curse them, bechulen and all these attributes, oiva beloy sesi, you get a lav. That's fine. Now we go back to Shavuos. Let's say you also have to use a curse. Again, the Shama Kol Ola tells us there has to be a curse involved. You have to say, I make you swear in the name of God that these curses should happen to you. For example, you say, Yakra Hashem Elikim, the Eibishter should give you the clause of the Torah. Yakra Elim, another pasuk. Zu ala ksuba Torah. That's the curse that's written in the Torah. So that's fine. You say the curse that the Torah gives on the Teichacha, that should happen to you if you don't come say testimony. That is part of the Shavuos Eidos. What happens if you didn't say the curse, but you tell the guy, Al Yakachav Yurechav Yetivla? You say to him that good things that happen to you, God should bless you if you come say testimony. on my behalf. But it's understood that if he doesn't come to say testify on your behalf, a curse will happen. So he said it in the positive way. But Meir says that still could be considered a Shavuos Eidus. A Chachamim Paitrim, Chachamim Zent. It's not a Shavuos Eidus. Now the Gemara says, Mashbiani Aleichem, my comma. What did he say? Amar Rav Yehuda, this is how you explain the beginning of the Mishnah. He says, Mashbiani Aleichem b'shvua amur b'Torah. I make you swear in the swearing that's written in the Torah. Mitzaviani Aleichem b'tzava amur b'Torah. I command you in the commandment that's written in the Torah. So you didn't use the word I command you in the commandment that discusses, you hinting to the commandment that discusses the parsha of taking an oath. But you didn't say the word shvua. Or the Torah uses, instead of the word shvua, a prohibition. So you say, I make you take a prohibition to come to say testimony on my behalf. So that's also considered a shvua. That's the pshat in the Mishnah, according to Rav Yehuda. Amalei Abayas, or Amar Abayas said, if you say, I put you in handcuffs, that you should say a testimony on my behalf, that's also Shavuos Eidus. Doesn't the Torah never uses the word handcuffs as another synonym for the word Shvuah? So how do these words mean a Shvuah? Ella Omar Abai said, I make you swear in an oath in the name of God. I command you in an oath in the name of God. In the name of God, I put you in handcuffs with the name of God. I guess what it means is that once you have the name of God in your expression, you don't even have to have the word shvuah there. The shvuah means using God's name, so it's understood that you putting him into an oath. Now the Gemara, instead of using Yud Kei Vav Kei, you used one of the nicknames of God. That's what the Mishnah said. That's also okay. Lamemra, do you want to say, from our Mishnah it's understood that not only Yud Kei Vav Kei is the name of God, the Chanun V'Racham Shemis Ninu. The Chanun V'Racham are also the names of God. Reminu, I will ask you a question. Yesh Shemesh Shenim Mechakim. When you're writing a Sefer Torah and you make a mistake, so there's certain names of God you're allowed to erase. There's certain names you're allowed to erase, and there's certain names that you're not allowed to erase. For example, you can't erase, even if you make a mistake, you can't erase it. Kegoin, for example, obviously Yud Kei Vav Kei you can't erase, but even Kel, Elekecha, Elekim, Elekechem, Eya, She'eya, Aleph, Dal, Yud Kei, Shakai, Tzvois, Harei Elu Einim Chokim, they're not allowed to be erased because these are nicknames of God. Aval Hagodol, Hagibar, Vahanoira, Haadir, Chazak, Vaametz, Izes, Chanun, V'Rachum, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed are really not names of God, and therefore Harei Einim Chokim they could be erased. So what the Gemara is understanding, how could you call, let's say, Chanun V'Rachum the name of God, and that you could use that for the proper way of making someone take a Shavuos Eidus oath, because that's the name of God. But if you make a mistake in the Torah, you're allowed to erase the word Rachum, or you're allowed to erase the word Chanun. So we see it's not the name of God. Amar Abaya said like this. The reason Masnis in our Mishnah explains, it's not that Chanun is a name, it's a reference to God. But Mishu Chanun, the one who is the one who is gracious. We go to Amud Beis. But Mishu Racham, the one who is merciful, Kamar. So it's not that the word Chanun is a name, it's the name that it's a reference to something, to someone. And it's a reference to God, but it's not an actual name of God. Therefore, it could be erasable, yet at the same time, it could be used in a Shvuah. Amalei Rava Ihachi. But Shemayim v'aretz nami b'mishnah Shemayim v'aretz shaloi come up. So why did the Mishnah say that if you use the word Shemayim v'aretz, it's not a shavua? We could also say that when you said, I make you swear in the heavens and the earth, I meant to say that I make you swear in whoever the heavens and earth belong to. And that's referring to God. So the Gemara says, Hachi Hasha, how can you compare? One is a descriptive. Hasam, by those words, nothing else is really called merciful or gracious. Vadai, it certainly refers to God. It's understood that you meant the one who is gracious and the one who has mercy. It's obvious that you're referring to that. Hacha over here, Kaven the Ika Shemai Vards, since there is a physical, it's not a descriptive, it's a noun. Heaven and earth is a noun. It's not a description. So B'Shemaim Vards come, and possibly you meant that you're making a shvua in the heaven or about the earth, but not describing the name of God. In order to have a proper shvuas edus, the name of God has to be in there. If it's not the name of God in there, it has to be like a description of God. So that's what Chanun and Baracham is. But Shemayim Va'aretz is a noun. It's not a descriptive of God, even though I know that God owns the Shemayim Va'aretz, but it could be that Shemayim Va'aretz for themselves is an actual thing, and that cannot be worked into a shvuah. Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kosav Aleph Lamed Melikim. If you wrote the Aleph Lamed from Melikim, Yud K mi Yud Yud me Hashem Hashem, Harei Zayin and Nimchot, it's not supposed to be raised. Let's say you only wrote Shin Dalet Mishadai, or Aleph Dalet mit Adonai, or Tzadik Beis Mitzvokos. So all these things, you only wrote part of the letters. Harei Zayin Nimchot, you're allowed to erase it. But one thing you do see, that the whole name Tzvokos is a name of God. Rabbi Yossi Aymat Tzvakos Kulei Nimchat. You can erase the whole name Tzvakos. It's not a name of God. Shalnikat Tzvakos El Hashem Yisrael. The only reason why the Eibush is called Tzvakos is only because he referred to the Jewish people as his Tziva. Shnema Vaitzesi as Tzivosai as Ami B'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim. I'm taking my groups, my legions, my nation, the Jewish people from the land of Mitzrayim. So that's why we refer to God as Tzvakos, but really it's what he owns, which is the Jewish people. So that's why Rabbi Yossi holds Tzvakos is not a name of God. Shmuel said, Ein halacha Rabbi Yossi, the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. Tana Rabbanim, again, Tana Rabbanim, Kol ha'tafel l'shev, bein b'lefonav, bein b'l'acharav, harei zeh nimcha. Even the name of God, you can't erase, right? Yud Kei Vav Kei. But let's say you have like a pre-letter in front of it or a post-letter after it, those can be erased. Could go in Lefonav Ketzad, give me an example. Like the Torah says, Lashem. So the Lamed, Nimchak, the Lamed could be erased. If the Torah says Bashem, by Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Beis Nimchak, the Beis can be erased. Vav Vashem, Vav Nimchak, the Vav can be erased. Meshem, the Mem Nimchak, the Mem can be erased. Shehashem, Shin Nimchak, the Shin could be erased. Hashem, the Hey Nimchak, the Hey could be erased. Kashem, Mikashem Elokeinu, Chaf Nimchak, the Chaf could be erased. La'achar of Ketzad, what's a postscript of God that could be erased? Elokei Nu, the Nun Vav, Nimchak. Elokei Hem, the Hey Mem Nimchak. Elokei Chem, the Chaf Mem Nimchak. The Chaf and the Mem could be erased. So we see the postscript and the prescript of the God's name can be erased. They remind me, but others say, La'achrav eina nimcha, what's written after God's name can never be erased. Like the Chaf Mem of Lekechem, Chaf Mem cannot be erased. Shekva Kitche Hashem, that the God's name sanctified that part of the letter. In other words, before God's name is written, there's no holiness. But after God's name is written, and then you add a postscript on it, so then that postscript has a kedusha like God's name and cannot be erased. That's what Acherim hold. Amar Rav Huna, halacha krachem, the halacha is like Acherim. We'll stop in 1.5 minutes, and then we'll stop just to start the next piece of Gemara. The Gemara says, Kol Shemesh Hamuris Ba'Avram Kodesh Chutz Mizah. Let's just do this one piece. The Torah tells you that every time God uses the word Adonai, which is Aleph Daled Nun Yud, is referring to holiness. Chutz mizeh shuchal, except this Adonai is non-holy word, because when Avram Avinu met the Malachim, he said, "Vayoyma Adonai imnom tzosichem beinecha." He said, Adonai could also mean my master. He's referring to you gentlemen. Please, if I find favor, please stay and be my guest. Hanina ben Achi, Mishum Rabbi Lazar ben Abzaya, Mishum Rabbi Lazar Amadia Amru. This group said Avzeh Kodesh. Avram Avinu wasn't talking to the Malachim, he was talking to God, and he was actually telling God, "Listen, stay around. I want to bring in this guest. I know you came to be Mevakar Chola me because I was the third day of the Mila. Please stick around, and I will need to take care of the guest." Kaman Ozlo Honda Amarav Yehuda Amarav Gedoyla Hachnosas Archim. Hachnosas Archim is greater. Yoisem at Kabbalas Pnei Shechina. That greater than is to receive guests than receiving God's presence. Kaman Kaisazug, because they hold like that's what Avram Avinu exactly stated to God. He told God, "Wait, I know you came to visit me, but I can't be busy with you now. I have to take care of guests." One final thing, but the opposite is by light. Kol shemus amurim b'light. Anything that's written by light is considered weekday. Chutz mizeh, except this one, shu kodesh. When light was referring to Adonai, he's actually referring to you, sir. He's referring to the malachim. Except one time light said a word, and he's referring to God. Shnema, when he's running away from Sodom, he said, "Vayomer light aleim." Light said to them, "Al no Adonai Shem." He's basically talking, "Please know God. I don't want to go here. I want to go to another place. I want to hide in another place." So he's actually referring to He's referring to God, who has the power to kill and to make people live. And that's when it says Adonai there, it's actually referring to God's name. Okay, we'll take a pause over here. Okay, hold.
All right.
So the Gemara continues, Kol Hashemish B'Novos Kodesh, and all the names that are written in by Novos, it says there like Kim. You have to see over there is holy. The Micha in the Tanakh Micha, regarding the story of Micha, there it's referring to the Elikim that it says over there. It's actually referring to Avodah Zarah. B'Novos Kodesh, Novos is holy. B'Micha Yesh Mem Chol, Yesh Mem Kanim. Some of them are holy, are non-holy, and some of them are holy. Aleph Lamed Chol Yud Kei Kodesh. When it says Aleph Lamed, there it's a profane, and Yud Kei, when it says Yud Kei, it's a holy word. So Elohim over there probably is referring to Avodah Zarah. There's one time Shalaf Lamed Vu Kodesh in the parsha in the Shoftim, that story there, it actually says Elikim, and it's referring to God, because Kol Yemei Hayos Beis Elikim B'Shiloi. That's when the house there, it's referring to actually God who was in Shiloi. Now, who was his Shiloi? That was the Mishkan, referring to when the Mishkan was in Shiloi. Kol Shemus Amurim Begibus Binyamin. Anytime it says Elikim and by Binyamin, the story over there when the Shvatim wanted to go to war against Binyamin, all those names are secular words, referring to Avodah Zarah. Pshuam and Kodesh means that they were asking God, all the other Shvatim, the Yehuda, if they should attack Binyamin. Amaloi. So v'chi maftiach ve'ena isa. Does if the Chumash said, the Tanakh says that when Shevet Yehuda was asking should they go to war against Shevet Binyamin, or when they were all making this civil war, God said yes, go, and they weren't successful 2 or 3 times. They weren't successful. So God said go to war. So would God give them a guarantee and not follow through? So it must be referring to they were asking Avodah Zarah. Yeshua, Mashev Tiach Asa. God did keep His word. They weren't asking are they going to be victorious or be a loser? And in other words, they just want to know, should we go to war? So go right ahead, God said. But you didn't ask me if you're going to win the war. But the last time they tried to go against Binyamin, Shibichanu, they asked God, are we going to win the war? Then God said, you will win the war. So it's always that they were asking God, not the Avodah Zarah, should they go to war. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron Kohen Omer Lefana B'Yamim Mehem Lemar Ha'Osev Oy Lotzis Mechama Im Bnei Binyamin Achi Agadol Imechta. I'm going to win the war. So therefore, by the last time they were asking if they're going to win the war, so then they got a positive answer. Kol Shloime Omur B'Shim Kainish. Whenever you see the word Shloime and Shir Shirim, it's a holy word. Shir L'Misha Shalom Shalai, referring to a song to whoever is in charge of peace, bringing peace. Chutz mizeh, except this one actually refers to Shlomo Melech. In other words, 80% of the population worked for Shlomo. 200 he set aside that they should be learning in Koil. So 20% should be in Koil, and 80% should work for the country. Some say that this pasuk is also referring to Chayil, referring to Shlomo. There's a pasuk in Shirashim. Shlomo was afraid to go to sleep, so he had 60 powerful men surrounding his bed. So that's referring to Shlomo, not God. So the Gemara says, so the Yeshayim agrees that there is that pasuk also. Both of these psukim are referring to Shlomo Melech. Halachol with Omer Shmuel Machusa the Katechad Meshita Ba'alma Loy Me'ancher Shnei Mekam Shalifon Chayav Shlomo the Machusa the Kia Masrum the Leitres Pia Machusa the Ara. Shmuel like Tanakav like Yashemim. Apparently Shmuel held that this pasuk that we brought before Kami Shalifon Lefonai Hoel Shlomo is referring to God, but basically what God was saying, only 80% of the malachim should be up here, 20% should be down here. So basically, only 20% should be working, and 80% should be dedicated to learning, basically, or doing other things, not for the Medina. So if that's the case, then Shmuel learned that the Karmi Shali Lefonoi or Elef L'Choshloimi refers to God. So now, if the Yesh Oimim held that Shlomo is referring to Shlomo HaMelech, and he mean Tashri Shlomo is also referring to Shlomo HaMelech, so Shmuel, like the Tanakama, like Yesh Oimim, he's not like the Tanakama or the Yesh Oimim. This is what the Yesh Oimim meant to say. Zeh kodesh v'zehu choil, the mitosei. In other words, Yesh Oimim held like Shmuel, or Shmuel held like the Yesh Oimim, that the pasuk that the Tanakama brought of is referring to God, and they brought another pasuk that in Shlomo refers to Shlomo HaMelech. Kol machaya hamura b'Daniel chayil chutz mezeshu kodesh. Anytime you see the word machaya in the Daniel king, it refers to Nebuchadnezzar. Except this one is a holy word, refers to God. Antu melech, antu malka. You are the real king, Malchaya. You decide who you're going to give the power to. You have to see the context of that pasuk, but that Machaya, Daniel was referring to God, not to Nebuchadnezzar. The Yeshayim Avzeh Kodesh, this one also he's referring to God, but not to Daniel, not to Nebuchadnezzar. Shnema Mori Chamal Chasona Pishla Ora. And he said to Nebuchadnezzar, Murray, master or king, your dream should happen to your enemies, and the explanation should be on your foes. So Laman Kama, who is Daniel referring to? Isal Kadaito Nebuchadnezzar Kamala, he's talking to Nebuchadnezzar, Sanoise Maninu. Israel, Melech Kalaylu Yisrael, he's cursing to the Jewish people. So basically, he's telling you, oh, this bad dream should happen to your enemies. So basically, Daniel's saying this bad dream should happen to the Jewish people, who are the chief enemies of Nebuchadnezzar. So that's why it's very hard to say that Daniel meant that. So what it really means is, Mari, oh God, this bad dream should happen to your enemies, God, and the explanation to happen to your foes. But he's not referring to Nebuchadnezzar. And God has, the Jewish people are not God's enemies. The Tanakama Sova, the Tanakama holds, it could be referring to Nebuchadnezzar. And basically, this bad dream should happen to Nebuchadnezzar's enemies who are not Jewish. Because Sani Yisrael, Ika, Sani Goyim, Leika, does Nebuchadnezzar only have enemies, Jewish enemies, no Gentile enemies? So he's basically saying, oh, Mari, Nebuchadnezzar, this bad dream should happen to your Goyish enemies. So he wasn't really cursing the Jewish people. That's why the Tanakama would learn that the Mari is not referring to not referring to God, but could also be referring to Nebuchadnezzar.